Right. So welcome everybody to the first show of the new year. And as I said on the email and on social media, I think this new year thing is a bit of a strange thing. It's a roll of a digit and not much else. I will explain that thinking. If we go back early enough, and some of you, if you've read my book, might be familiar with this concept, but our pagan Celtic ancestors, they base their year on the fact that we take 364 days a year to go around the sun, and we have 13 lunar cycles in a year. They come 28 days, and that kind of fits the year exactly. You know, so we have that day-night, and then there's the lunar cycle, and then obviously there's a seasonal cycle, and there's an annual cycle. And if we look at the nature, then the numbers all add up, and it makes an awful lot of sense. So what have we done? We thought, well, stuff this 13-month, this lunar year, we'll have 12 months a year. That makes a lot of sense. And then somebody went, we done work. Because we have some months with 31 days in them, and some months with 30 days in them, and 1 month with 28 days in them. And that don't quite work, because every fourth year we have to have an extra day to catch up with the quarter of days that are there extra anyway. And then you say, well, okay, we've got this Christmas thing and this New Year thing. Let's make one the 25th, and we've got this strange month thing going on, so we'll make that 1st of January the New Year date. Now, wouldn't it make much more sense if we had New Year on the 21st, on the solstice, on the day where we had the longest night and the shortest day? That seems to me much, much more sensible. And come to that, was Jesus born on the 25th? I think Victorians have got more to answer for that than probably anyone else. So I think we should be having New Year's Day on the 26th of December in our current monthly terminology. Makes more sense to me, kind of fits everything, fits their natural cycles of life. And but as we shall see later, there's a bit more about kind of natural cycles of life and communication and the world that we live in. But we're going to get onto that in a little while. So, while I think about it, of course, please feel free to use the chat function. If you have anything that you'd like to add, that would be great. I will do my level bit. Because I'm on the PC, I've got the chat box open. And if you want to put anything in there, please do. And I will do my level best to answer any queries or any questions that you would like to put in there. Okay, so that's cool. Anyway, so swiftly moving on, got some great footage of kestrels. Fantastic, fantastic, amazing bird that we see probably mostly on the edges of motorways and dual carriageways, because we've got that kind of natural space where we don't do anything with it and it gets left the way it should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the video. Now, I was going to put some narration on the video, and I kind of watched the video through and I thought, they don't need any narration. Just celebrate the fact that we've got these amazing birds that hover. I mean, they used to be called the wind hover. That was their traditional name for obvious reasons. But if you say, just enjoy it, the last clip, and if you're not sure, that's the one that's really in focus and it's quite close up, and just watch its head. Watch the head of the kestrel, because it's quite amazing what a kestrel can really do, especially when you see it. So have a look at the head of the kestrel, and we'll have a little bit of a chat about them afterwards. I actually filmed these on the 21st of December, the solstice. So there you go. Could have been a message there. Anyway, I'm going to play the video. So let me share that, and there's the video, and hopefully
never let you go. Never let you go.
So there you go. Incidentally, I remember watching something years and years ago. Yeah. And you'll have noticed there that some of those shots were in focus and some of them weren't. And it was a conversation over a nude painting. This is, of course, entirely relevant. And the person said, what's the difference between art and pornography? And the person in the conversation said, well, if it's in focus, it's pornography. And if it's out of focus, it's art. So that was mostly art Kestrels with a little bit of Kestrel porn. Anyway, so that's Kestrels. But what I think is absolutely amazing, if you watch that clip at the end, the head never moved unless the Kestrel wanted it to. It was a pretty windy, blustery day. Obviously, with that first scene, you can see we're up on top of the cliffs. And the Kestrel is capable of with no effort, hold its head absolutely rock solid in so that it can see exactly what it's looking at. And you know, it's one of those, when you see an animal or something happening out in the countryside, which is not usual, and to be fair, that possibly is, you have to say, what's that creature trying to tell me? And just maybe the message of Kestrel is to be absolutely focused, because a Kestrel is, you know, that's what it does. Its entire existence is geared around being focused, because ultimately, in the case of a Kestrel, you've got to be focused to get your dinner. And they can actually see a beetle moving around at around about 50 meters. Now, that's pretty awesome when you think about it. I mean, you've heard about how the eyesight of eagles and how far they can see. But if you're a Kestrel, and Kestrel obviously is a falcon, like a peregrine or a merlin or a hobby, they're all part of the same group. To be able to see something the size of a beetle at 50 meters is pretty phenomenal, I think. So that's pretty cool. Now, they actually eat things like they'll take birds if they can get them, but generally they take small animals, worms, and insects. Voles are a favourite, and they need to eat 4 to 8 voles a day, which is quite a lot when you think about it. Now, that means that when they're up there hovering, they've got to be able to see through the brush, you know, through whatever's on the ground, because they've got to get through it to get to their dinner, which is why heathland and the edges of motorways and A roads, as we were saying earlier, is such an absolutely vital habitat for them, because they need it undisturbed, but they also need it to be not too thick and not too dense. And if you're at meadow on a chalk grassland, is perfect because it has to be managed to keep it as a meadow, and it's not too thick. There's tracks of brambles and things, but they can access most of the places they need to go to find food. I don't know if I'm a bit lower today. I seem to be having a serious Humpty Dumpty effect. But anyway, so that's But one of the things they also do, though, they are prone to stashing food. The difference, though, between a squirrel and a kestrel is that the kestrel will normally eat the food later in the day, so that it's still edible, and they're not prone to forgetting where they put it, which is pretty cool. Some basic natural history facts: they are capable of laying eggs and raising them from about a year old, but generally they wait until they're 2. Lifespan roughly about 5 years. They're not the biggest of our birds of prey, but and they'll have between 3 and 6 chicks in a nest each year. But bizarrely, because most birds of prey, most raptors, the youngsters tend to try and beat each other up and kick one out of the nests, so that only one, the biggest, strongest, aggressive one, survives. Kestrels kind of get on. They kind of like each other, and they tend to stay together for quite a while when they actually leave the nest. They stay in the nest for around about 4 weeks, and the parents will carry on feeding them for about 4 weeks before they kind of then go off and do their own thing. They only protect the area right the way around the nest, and that is, could be a few hundred yards, but they actually need an area generally between kind of 1 and 10 square kilometers. But they'll actually quite happily share a territory for food with other adults if there's enough food around. And if food is scarce, then they just don't raise youngsters at all. Currently on the amber list, their numbers declined quite a lot in the 70s and 80s, which is probably due to changes in farming. Little things like the fact that we have autumn sown crops these days, which has had effects on skylarks and things like that as well. So in the old days, where obviously you'd have the stubble, they'd leave it, burn it off, and then sow new in the spring. Obviously, the autumn sown crops have just changed the way that the prey lives, the amount of space and area that the prey's got, especially over winter. But anyway, I think it's just pretty amazing birds. But I love that ability. If you think about it, they can facing into the wind, which could be blowing at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, and just with the slightest gingery movements of their wings, and they can move it quite rapidly if they have to, they can keep their head absolutely rock solid steady. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Really, really do just admire that amount of skill. That skill, that dedication, and that focus. We could have learned that. I'll start singing it in a minute. You can learn a lot from kestrels, just looking at the animals, birds in our countryside. Anyway, I'm going to take a step away from wildlife and countryside for the moment, because we've had this feature, which I've enjoyed actually, which is about really, really cool books. And we've looked at things like Braiding Sweetgrass. I really haven't forgotten how to speak. Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. That was pretty phenomenal. We had a look at Black Elk Speaks. That one was pretty amazing. As I say, today I've got a book that I've literally picked it up by accident. And I was in an online group, a bit like this one, and they were talking about this book, and I thought, oh, sounds interesting. I'll have a go at that. I'll check that one out, order it on Amazon, put it in my list of books that are there, and it sat there for several months until it kind of called out to me. And it's funny, sometimes things happen or they just occur, or they almost kind of call to you at a certain time. And I think this one actually called to me at the right time. It was waiting. It's a book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Now, the thing is, the group I was in at the time was very much into Celtic spirituality. And I assumed Big Magic was something to do with Celtic spirituality, because that was kind of the stuff that they generally talked about. Anyway, bought the book, put it on the shelf, and just after Christmas, I picked it up. I'd given myself a book to read for Christmas. I read a lot. I wouldn't call myself a bookworm. It's not about reading, it's about knowledge. I have a thirst for knowledge. And I usually read either books about self-help, self-advancement, psychology, all that kind of stuff, or I read business books. be a better business person, or I read books about spirituality and religion. And I tend to rotate around those. But I thought of Christmas, I'm going to read something different. So I picked a book about samurai history. And I really enjoyed it, actually. It was really good. It was a real change from the norm for me. So I enjoyed that. But after it, because I finished it before we came to I think I finished it on the 30th or maybe the 29th. So I picked up this book, and the magic it's talking about is actually creativity. The lady's an author. She's the author of Eat, Pray, Love, which you may have seen the movie, even if you haven't read the book. I haven't read the book, I have seen the movie, and I'm planning to have another look at it now I've read this book. But she makes the case that there are 4 things on this earth. There are plants, there are animals, there are minerals. Remember that game, 20 questions? And there are creative ideas. And these creative ideas have a bit of their mind of their own. So say, for example, there was an idea to write a fantastic book about, I don't know, steam trains. And somebody kind of liked the idea of writing and being an author, and they decided that they were going to dedicate their life to it, whether or not they ever got famous or successful. And the idea floated around, and it came up, and they had contact. And you kind of say, yes, I like that idea. I'm going to write that book. And you get fired up and you research it and you write it. You find the angle to try and make it a little bit different. And that idea will stay with you for a certain amount of time, providing that you nourish it and you show it some affection and some love and you crack on with it. Or you can say, no, I don't want that idea, and it'll go mooching along and it'll try and find someone else. Kind of, yeah. Like the rest of us, if somebody really doesn't want you about, you just tend to, after a while, say, well, it's pretty pointless. And so off they go. And I can kind of get that idea, because the main chunk of the view over the wall, the trunk, I don't think I could write it again. I really don't. It took a long time from that initial idea to actually grapple and get the whole flow of it. And when I did get hold of that, and when creativity really did get in there, I managed to put the plan of it together in about 2 hours, and then spent the next probably 5 or 6 months writing it. But I'm so glad I didn't ever lose it, because I don't think I could have done it again. I think that creative thing came in, hit me, bosh, and when I finished it, it was over and done. So I'm so glad it was there. I tweaked it and changed it around a little bit, gave it to several people, and there's now debate whether or not it's too big a chapter, whether I should shorten it up, whether I should have put titles in, or however. But as a piece, a chunk, as a work, as a body of work, I'm really pleased with it. I'm really proud of it. But as I say, I think that creative thing did actually land on me. But she's got this amazing example in here to prove that this creativity kind of thing, this idea does actually come along, stay with you for a while, and then possibly move on. And the example she gives is this. She'd had this idea, this great idea about a book that was in the Brazilian rainforest, about a lady, let me get this right, the lady who was there because her husband was working, got involved with some indigenous people, and obviously they were trashing some of the forest and various different things were happening. And she got it all sorted out. She'd gone there, she'd researched it, and was all ready to rock and roll with this idea when her husband had a catastrophe, a disaster. I don't remember exactly what the disaster was, and she had to put the book on hold. She kept all her notes, she kept everything that she'd researched and sorted out, and went and sorted out what she needed to do with her husband. And when she had got all that sorted out, and it was an immigration thing, because her husband she's an American, and her husband was not American, and we know what America is like at the moment for letting people in immigration and all that. So it was a year or two when she came back and picked up the book. When she came back and picked up all her notes, there was nothing. She hadn't got the oomph, she hadn't got the drive, she hadn't got the whatever it is to actually write this book. And so she went on to another idea, and the idea got abandoned. She then met a lady at a convention, at a meeting, another author, and they got on really, really well. And they had a chat and quick hug, kiss, peck on the cheek, and went their separate ways and didn't see each other for several months, maybe a year later. And when she did, a friend said, I've got this amazing idea for this book I've got started. It's absolutely fantastic. It's about the Amazon. And the author of the book, Elizabeth Gilberts, she said, oh, I had an amazing story about the Amazon. And she said, well, she said, right, tell me yours first. So Elizabeth Gilbert outlined the entire story that she had. And this other lady, she said, as a 4-letter word begins with F that I can't say on a public show. I think she said, your actually was, you have got to be kidding me. And they both kind of like went, oh, okay. And the other lady then outlined her idea for her story in the Amazon. And it was exactly the same story. They hadn't mentioned it. They hadn't discussed it, anything at all. And she swears, both of them swear absolutely blind, that the idea jumped from Elizabeth Gilbert to her friend when they had that quick hug and a kiss, because Elizabeth Gilbert hadn't fed the idea, hadn't picked it up, hadn't run with it. The idea said, well, no, I'm not staying here, and jumped across. Make of that one what you will. But when I read that, I'm like, whoa, yeah, I get this. I'm tuned with this. This one makes sense to me. And I tell you what, it's got nice big words, and there's lots of light gaps in between the lines. It was a really interesting read. I read the whole book in about 3.5 days, which is pretty rapid for me. Because usually I'm double checking and sorting and arranging and firing up. But anyway, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I really, really do recommend it. It's absolutely brilliant. And it basically just says you should do whatever you want to do, as long as you're coming from a good place, whatever age you are. I mean, she's also got a story about a lady who's 90, decided at the age of 80 she wanted to become an expert in, I think it was some kind of prehistoric animals. And in her 90s, she's now one of the experts that people go and ask about these prehistoric animals. So at the end of the day, you're never too old. You should always do whatever it is that fires you up, always, because we're not here for long. I just love the sense of open excitement, adventure. No matter what your life is, you've got to run with it. So, and you're probably already thinking, well, I'm sure there's another video coming here somewhere, and he's waffling away. Well, I am. So, I've got a backlog of various videos and bits and pieces for main features. I've still got 2 more from Scotland when we were up there. But an amazing one from the Isle of Arran, which has got 1 or 2 really, really interesting philosophically spiritual elements to it. And I was thinking about getting that one together. But on Sunday, the 2nd of January, I went out for a walk. It was supposed to be a horrible, miserable day. It's one of those where, I just don't want to go out. And then the minute you get out, you think, how long have I got? The air was beautiful, and it was a most amazing morning. And I saw something I've never seen before. And I saw something that I wrote about in the view over the wall as well. I'm not going to tell you what that was, but I was out for about 1.5 hours, nearly 2 hours, and I was only going for half an hour. So I imagine my wife thought, I bet he's seen something. I bet he's got caught up. I bet something's happened. You know what he's like when he gets out in the countryside. Anyway, I shot some video, and I'm going to play this video through because it's rather cool. I think it's rather cool. I'm biased. I shot it and I'm in it. So check this one out. This is the brooks in winter. So.
Never let you go.
So I've been in the area for all my life. Lived in my current house for around about 23 years. This is part of one of my favourite walks. In fact, if you followed any of my vlogs, you'll have seen views around here many times. I come out with the dogs pretty much every day. I don't get down here every day, but I probably get down here 40, 50, maybe 100, maybe 200 times a year. This is one of the few places where you can hear running water, so I'm often prone to sitting down just above the archway on that section of concrete and just sitting and listening to the water. In all that time, I have never ever seen the water coming over the top quite like this. It's kind of magical. Actually, it's more than that, it's really magical. It's funny because on my way down here, and for the second time in the week, I've seen buzzards taking off from the ground and almost leading me a different way. But today, rather than come down and go through the normal way, which is obviously across the bridge, I actually went up over the top. And as I got there were some magpies, 2 magpies. And they brought my attention back down to here, where I might not normally have come. And that just might have been to see this, and to hear this, and to feel the magic here in the air of this day. And you might say that's hokum. Maybe it is. But I firmly believe that if you listen and you look, the land talks to us. The question is, are you listening? Are you listening? It was whilst I was stood here thinking, this reminds me, as it often does, of Kenneth Graham's Tales from the Riverbank. And I'm expecting to see Mole go, "Hello, Rat." And Rat go, "Hello, Mole. Would you like to come over?" Or even though there's no roads, Toad coming along going, "Toot toot, toot toot." And I was wondering what the cows might do next. There's quite a herd of youngsters in here. When all of a sudden I saw that beautiful, beautiful streak of blue. The most unnatural blue, almost. And yet an unnatural blue that we only get from nature. As I realised, as I didn't even bother to go fumbling for my phone, that what I'd seen, and it was the first one in quite a while, was a kingfisher. The most beautiful blue of birds. And it just came streaking past.
Now, just maybe, that's what all those signs were pointing to. Something beautiful. Maybe we need to keep looking, because there's always something beautiful. Here we are, we're at the bridge. It's a bridge where I filmed a lot of videos. It's been an amazing walk. Kingfisher, buzzards, magpies, and bumped into a lot of people. It's an unexpectedly glorious morning. But it's funny. Just picked Bruno up to stop him getting muddy as we go through the bit by the bridge, which is always really squelchy. And what happened? I slipped over, sat in the mud, and got myself dirty. But it's alright because I managed to keep Bruno clean. I feel like a lovely little bit of irony. Especially when I was just thinking, I could do my exercises. Why not? And I might still do. And then people arrived. And I thought, would I do them if people were there? And I thought, do you know, it's funny. If they arrived whilst I was doing them, I probably would carry on. Would I start if they were there? I doubt it. Even those of us who like to think we live really well and independently of the good wishes of other people are still prone to a little bit of self-consciousness. Sometimes even quite a lot. What a beautiful day.
Never let you go.
Well, there you go. It was an amazing morning. I quite enjoyed putting that together earlier. It really was. But it's funny. You've got to be looking. You've got to be looking, right? And there's a chapter in the book about a kingfisher that I saw at Kersney Abbey. And that was, again, there must have been 100 people, probably at least, in the Abbey, picnicking, having lunch. And a kingfisher went, when we were looking towards the cafe, the Abbey, went from the left right the way across the whole length of those ponds at Kersney Abbey. And I think probably I was the only person that saw it. And a kingfisher is beautiful. Maybe we need to do a section in one of these about the most beautiful colours we see and the creatures that carry them. Because kingfishers, you rarely ever see a kingfisher sat. You just see that blue streak and it's glorious, absolutely glorious. And yeah, do animals give us signs and messages? Again, there's some sections of stories in the book. Absolutely they do. The world definitely talks to us, because if you think about it, right, the world, our environment loves us as much as we have to love it. After all, it feeds us, it quenches our thirst, it gives us air to breathe, and it asks nothing in return. And the book, I don't know if I'll bring it on the next time. Got to finish it first. It's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I'm reading it at the moment, and it's an absolute mind blower. It's the science behind the law of attraction. It's quantum mechanics, quantum physics. And I'm reading this and I'm like, my God, the science really, really does back this stuff up. So we're going to talk about that one because I tell you, it's, you have to believe. You have to believe and you have to have focus like the Kestrel. But you know what? It's all true. And you are totally in control of your own destiny. Even if, like I did, I've worked too much anxiety and drank way too much beer to try and hide it. You know, I'm not going into that one for the moment. So that was that video. That was that day. That's nature giving me that gift for today's show. And yeah, so that's that one. So next week, I can't be here. Much as I will hopefully be having a co-host soon. It's a little early to get him in. So gonna have to do the next one in a fortnight, I think, which takes a little pressure off. I've got rather a lot. I've taken on a part-time contract and it's got hours all over the place, but it's great fun. So, and I can't be here for next week, but hopefully by the time we're here next time, the new website will be up, simonpollard.uk, which is the latest version of it has just come through today. I haven't had a chance to have a look yet, so that's exciting. We've got 5 senses walks, 5 senses. We're looking at different names. We may be going to call them outdoor anti-anxiety workshops because we're getting a lot of reports coming back saying this is amazingly good for mental health, and just getting people out on walks is making things happen. But say more on that another time. So I think on that note, there's no other great pressing news at this moment in time. I hope you've had a really cool evening. If you have, please go out and tell the world. It'd be great to get some more people here, swell these numbers. And I'll see you in a fortnight. Yes, Jen, so with your permission, I'll put you on the mailing list as of next week. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to have a new face. But unless there's anything that anybody would like to specifically ask right now, I will say thank you very much indeed. I will stop the recording, and if there's anything you want to say off the record, then you can. So thank you very much indeed. It's been another amazing evening. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed your company, and see you again soon.